You walk into a room, people glance at you once. Then again, you haven't said a word and still, something shifts. They don't know why they're quieter, why their tone changes, why they feel the need to explain themselves more clearly now. But you do. Power doesn't need to speak, it radiates. You've felt it before, haven't you? That person who enters a room and everything gets tense, but no one knows why. It wasn't their outfit. It wasn't their status, it was their aura. And if you're honest, you've wished you had that. You've been overlooked. You've said something brilliant and watched it drown in noise. You've felt invisible in a room where others controlled the tempo, the tone, the attention. But what if you could flip the script? Not by being louder, but by being so internally composed that others can't help but lean in. That's what Machiavelli understood centuries ago, not just in theory. In execution, he saw that kings rule not by raising their voices, but by mastering the atmosphere itself. He wrote, "It is much safer to be feared than loved, if one must choose, but fear the kind that matters. Isn't loud, it's quiet. It walks in silently and stills the room." This is not about charm, not about charisma. It's about building a presence so controlled, so internally anchored, that people begin adjusting themselves, even when you haven't said a word. Greene wrote, in the 48 Laws of Power, reputation is the cornerstone of power. With reputation alone, you can intimidate and win, but reputation is just the echo of something deeper. Aura, and aura is built. Today, I'll show you how to build it. I'll show you how to walk into a room and own the gravity of it, how to turn silence into your greatest weapon, how to make people doubt themselves just by looking at you. You won't need to raise your voice. You'll learn to raise your presence. And when you do, you'll understand what kings, dictators, seducers, and CEOs have always known. The real power is felt, never announced. There was a time I thought I had to prove everything. I used to walk into rooms smiling too wide, speaking too fast, trying to sound smart, trying to be liked, trying to be seen, but I was ignored. The louder I became, the more invisible I felt, until one day, I met a man who didn't speak at all. We were in a meeting. Everyone else was posturing, joking, selling, interrupting, but he just sat there, hands folded, face unreadable. He said nothing for almost 30 minutes, and yet everyone kept watching him. When he finally spoke, the room fell silent, not because he forced it, but because we all needed to hear what he thought. That's when I realized, power doesn't come from noise. It comes from tension, from the discomfort your stillness creates in others. In stillness is the key. Ryan Holiday writes, stillness is not about the deep presence that allows you to act with clarity and strength when it matters most. Stillness is pressure. It doesn't chase attention, it pulls it in. The confident don't rush, the powerful don't flinch, and the dangerous don't react. All men have eyes, but few have the gift of penetration. Even Machiavelli said in The Prince, men in general judge more from appearances than from reality. So when you say nothing, but radiate control, you leave them with no choice but to project onto you their insecurities, their fear, their need for your approval. And that's when your aura begins to take shape, not because you've earned it with words, but because your stillness forced them to invent a story about you. That's what Caesar did. He didn't speak to be understood. He observed, he paused. He made others second-guess themselves until they started deferring to him, just to escape the tension of his silence. Most people perform, but the few who dominate do it by withholding. So if you want to build real power, don't speak first. Don't rush to prove, don't give away your rhythm, sit still. Speak slow, watch everything, say nothing until it matters. Because in a world built on frantic energy, stillness is what makes kings. There's a strange moment when you stop trying to win the room and realize you can shape it instead. It happens the first time you walk in and decide, I'm not adjusting to them, they'll adjust to me. It feels like defiance at first, but then it becomes design. Daniel Goleman calls this emotional contagion in primal leadership. Leaders set the emotional tone. The mood of a room shifts based on the calm or chaos they bring into it. Most people never realize this. They chase alignment. They look for cues. Who's laughing, who's nodding, who's in charge, and they try to fit in. He's not fitting in. He's infecting the atmosphere with his own emotional signature. You don't need a title to do this. You need control. Walk in calm, still, unreadable, and the chaos begins to quiet itself. They'll glance at you, lower their voices, talk differently. Not because you asked, but because your energy forced a recalibration. Greene, 48 Laws of Power. Law 31, control the options. Get others to play with the cards you deal. You don't control people by barking orders. You control the climate, and they follow unconsciously. Just look at Napoleon. He wasn't the tallest man in the room, but he carried stillness like a weapon. His soldiers said that when he was calm, they could face death. When he smiled slightly, they believed they would win. That's not charisma. That's atmospheric control. It's a quiet dominance that doesn't ask for attention. It bends the mood of the room until your rhythm becomes the only rhythm that matters. And it's not limited to war rooms or boardrooms. You can do it anywhere. When you don't flinch while others panic. when you remain silent while others overshadow. When your presence speaks so loudly, no one hears themselves clearly anymore. The result, they lean in. They start seeking your cues before they speak. And in that moment, you've won the room without raising your voice. Because the man who controls the atmosphere controls the outcome. You've been told all your life, be open, be honest, let people in. But Machiavelli would have looked you in the eye and said, that's how kings fall. Because what no one tells you is this: the more they see you, the more they can predict you. And what they can predict, they can destroy. We live in a culture addicted to exposure. Social media, confession, everyone trying to be understood, to be liked, to be transparent. But you must choose the opposite path. Greene said in The Laws of Human Nature, always say less than necessary. Conceal your intentions. The less they know, the harder it is to manipulate you. When you reveal yourself, you offer people a map. And soon, they know which buttons to press. They know where to hit you. Emotionally, socially, politically. Your transparency becomes a target. That's why the Machiavellian doesn't seek to be liked. He seeks to be misunderstood, but still followed. Because the most powerful men in history weren't fully known. They were imagined. Julius Caesar, adored and assassinated. Brutus knew him, knew his habits, his heart, his hopes, and that's what made him dangerous. But the unreadable man, the one whose motives you can't pin down, you can't predict him. And if you can't predict him, you fear him. Ryan Holiday put it best in Ego is the Enemy. Silence is strength. Reserve is power. Let them wonder what you're thinking. Let them debate whether you're kind or cruel. Let them fear whether you've even noticed them or already judged them. Because the moment they feel they have you figured out, you become manageable, replaceable, weak. Don't offer clarity. Offer contrast. You don't owe them your thoughts. You don't owe them your story. You owe them nothing except effect. Become the kind of man they talk about after you leave, because they still can't explain who you are or what you want, but somehow they know you're the one who set the tempo. So stop oversharing, stop explaining, stop performing honesty like it's strategy. You are not a mirror, you are a shadow. And the less they know about you, the more power they give you, just trying to understand you. Power doesn't come from being known. It comes from being guessed at. People don't fear what they understand. They fear what they can't explain, but can't stop thinking about. That's why the Machiavellian doesn't fill every silence. He doesn't finish every sentence. He lets his words trail off and linger, because the brain hates incompletion. And when you leave space, emotional space, verbal space, they fill it with their own fears. Greene, in The Art of Seduction, wrote, mystery is the lifeblood of seduction. It keeps people engaged, desperate to know more, and vulnerable to your influence. So you don't speak clearly, you speak like fog. You offer just enough to spark their imagination, then retreat into silence. And here's the twist. The version of you they invent will always be more powerful than the version you could ever explain. They'll wonder, was he serious? Was that a warning or a compliment? Did he plan this or just anticipate it? Let them ask. Let them fill in the blanks. Because the mind, once engaged in uncertainty, creates its own myth. Cal Newport echoes this in Deep Work. What's rare becomes valuable. What's unavailable becomes desirable. And what's mysterious, it becomes irresistible. You don't need to impress, you need to disturb their assumptions. Make them wonder if you're 5 steps ahead, or simply playing a deeper game. Give them riddles, not clarity. Let your actions contradict your words. Let your silence contradict your gaze. Say strangely, and then disappear. Because the moment someone thinks they've figured you out, you become a person again. But when they don't know whether you're a danger, an ally, or something beyond both, you become a force. So speak in fragments. Move like a mirage. Leave gaps in your story, and let them spend days filling in what you never confirmed. Because when they invent you, they obsess over you. And that obsession, that's control, without even lifting a finger. What makes a person unforgettable? It's not just what they do, it's how unpredictably they do it. Be warm today, and cold tomorrow, then ignore them for a week. Praise someone once, speak boldly in one moment, then vanish into silence the next. Because here's the brutal truth. Predictability kills power. When people know your rhythm, they settle. They anticipate you. And what they anticipate, they stop fearing. But the Machiavellian, he never lets them settle. He changes rhythm like a storm. Sudden, silent, then overwhelming. Greene, in The Art of Seduction, puts it clearly. Alter your pattern. Lull your targets with predictability, then jolt them with the unexpected. It's not cruelty. It's control through emotional imbalance. Think of the leaders you couldn't ignore, then turned distant. The boss whose moods you could never read, the partner who gave you affection. They stayed in your head not because they were kind, but because they were inconsistent enough to keep you alert. In Attached, Dr. Amir Levine explains, intermittent reinforcement is the most addictive emotional pattern in human psychology. When reward comes unpredictably, not every time, but just enough, people become hooked. So don't offer comfort, offer confusion. Let your energy shift like weather. Let them feel like they almost have you, only for you to change shape again. And they'll say things like, I just can't figure him out, but now I feel cold. He was so kind. It's like he sees through me. But docenti, perfect. That confusion isn't weakness. It's emotional gravity, because while they're busy trying to decode you, they don't realize they've already submitted to your rhythm. And this rhythm isn't chaos. It's choreographed. You set the tempo. They dance around your silence. They crave consistency. And you give them just enough to keep hoping. This is how obsession is born. Not through attention, but through uncertainty. So never be consistent for too long. Switch tones. Shift pace. Change your expression, your intensity, your presence. Let them adapt to your weather. Because once you control someone's emotional climate, you don't need rules anymore. They'll follow your storms. There's a reason diamonds are worshipped and gravel is stepped on. Not because one is louder, but because one is rarer. The same is true of power. If they see you too often, if they can always access you, if your time, energy, and presence come too easily, you become gravel. People may like you, they may even respect you, but they will never revere you. Robert Cialdini calls this the scarcity principle in influence. People assign more value to opportunities and things when they are less available. If you're always online, always responding, always showing up, you become predictable. And predictability breeds comfort. Comfort breeds casual, and casualness is the graveyard of power. But the Machiavellian doesn't make this mistake. He withdraws, he disappears on purpose. It appears strategically, when it's inconvenient for others, when it increases pressure, when his silence has already said enough. Greg McKeown, in Essentialism, reminds us, if you don't prioritize your presence, someone else will do it for you. People remember what is rare. They prepare for what is scarce. They analyze what is hard to predict. That's why legends rarely show up. Steve Jobs didn't do interviews often, but when he did, people stopped breathing. Princess Diana could command global attention with a single appearance. Jay-Z rarely drops music now, but when he does, the industry holds its breath. Why? Because they're not present all the time. They're essential, which means they are missed. Let that sink in. Do people miss you, or have they simply gotten used to you? If your presence doesn't create a shift, it's been done not because you lack power, but because you gave it away too frequently. So pull back, not out of arrogance, but out of strategy. Disappear, not to punish, but to reset value. Say no. Decline invitations. Let texts wait. Don't show up unless your presence will shift the energy. Because when you are always visible, you are always replaceable. But when you become rare, when you move like a high-value asset, people begin to anticipate you. They plan around you. They adjust to your time. They feel your absence like oxygen has left the room. That's not ego. That's aura management. And when you return, they'll be reminded that you were never common. You were always the diamond they took for granted, until you vanished. Most people try to win attention by performing. They fill the room with sound, with energy, with effort, but they don't understand. The loudest person isn't the most powerful. The one who moves the least is. Olivia Cabane wrote, in the charisma myth, charisma is presence, power, and warmth, but presence is the foundation. People aren't drawn to you because of how much you say. They're drawn because of what your existence does to the room. That's the shift. From how can I impress them, to how can I control the space without a word. You don't rush your walk. You don't fidget. You don't smile, just a smooth tension. You sit straight, not stiff. Your shoulders relaxed, your gaze grounded. You look like someone who's already been chosen. Because you don't chase attention, you assume it. Think of Keanu Reeves or Barack Obama. They don't fill rooms with noise, they fill them with weight. Their presence disrupts the air, even before they speak. Because they've mastered one principle. The world leans towards stillness. Why? Because everyone else is moving too much. Everyone else is compensating, performing, adjusting. But when you're still, when you move like your time is valuable, when you speak like your words are assets, you create tension. And tension is attention. So stop trying to be interesting. Stop flooding conversations with opinions just to stay relevant. Instead, speak slowly. Pause deliberately. Let your words land like stone in water, and watch the ripples form around them. Olivia Cabane again. When you pause before speaking, people assume you are considering something wise. Let silence precede your thoughts, and they'll hang on the next one. Let stillness shape your expression, and they'll second guess what you're thinking. Let presence replace performance, and they'll feel unsettled without knowing why. Dress with intention, nothing flashy, no logos, just sharp lines and discipline. Move like someone who doesn't need to fill the room, because you already own it. In a world of performers, the one who doesn't perform becomes the most mysterious, the most controlled, the most powerful, because you're not trying to be seen, you're trying to be felt, and those who are felt are never forgotten. We're trained to fill silence. From childhood, we're taught that long pauses are awkward, that silence must be broken. But the Machiavellian understands something deeper. Silence isn't absence, it's pressure. And when used correctly, it becomes your loudest weapon. Daniel Kahneman, in Thinking, Fast and Slow, explains, when people are forced into slow thinking, such as during tense silences, they become more cautious, more emotional, more prone to projection. That's what you're doing when you pause before you speak. You're not hesitating. You're creating space for their fear to echo. Because when you withhold response, the other person starts second-guessing themselves. Did I say too much? Did I offend him? Why isn't he reacting? Suddenly, the silence isn't empty. It's alive, filled with all the questions they won't ask. And here's the secret. The longer they think before you speak, the more power your next words will have. Daniel Goleman in Emotional Intelligence wrote, "Self-regulation, the ability to pause, is the root of all influence. Those who master their reactions control the frame." Picture it, a top CEO sitting in a boardroom, silently watching the speaker fumble. A general letting the enemy commander exhaust himself with monologue, then raising an eyebrow. A mystic pausing before answering a question, letting the seeker tremble in anticipation. It's not charisma, it's control of rhythm. And silence, it becomes your metronome, the beat that everyone else unconsciously follows. So kill the habit of reacting too quickly. No more yeah, s, unhung s, or nervous laughter. When someone finishes speaking, let the air stretch. Let them lean into it, needing your reaction, and say nothing. Because in that space, you say everything. Silence becomes your signature, not one of indecision, but emotional dominance. When used right, silence makes people think you know more than you're letting on, forces others to project their own fears, creates anticipation so sharp they'll remember what you said for days. And when you finally do speak, do it with surgical weight, short, precise, delivered like a weapon, not a sentence. That's not awkward. That's tactical gravitas. You don't interrupt. You don't overexplain. You let silence hang like a shadow behind your words, because the one who can endure silence never has to raise their voice. In every room there are two types of people: those trying to be seen, and those who are already felt. The first group performs. They speak the most. They dominate the conversation. They crack jokes, drop names, show off, trying to earn significance. Let them. As Susan Cain wrote in Quiet, there's zero correlation between being the best talker and having the best ideas. Let them scramble for the spotlight. Let them perform their confidence, because while they're showing off, they're exposing themselves, their insecurities, their desperation, their tells. Robert Greene, in The Laws of Human Nature, said it plainly. People reveal who they are in moments of excitement and boasting. The more they talk, the easier they are to read. So you don't interrupt. You don't try to match their volume, you simply watch. And while they burn themselves out trying to be interesting, you become something else entirely, unreadable. Picture this, a courtroom. The loud lawyer gesturing, pacing. Meanwhile, the silent judge sits still, calm, composed, watching. Everyone knows who controls the room. That's you now. You're not trying to impress. You're studying. You're storing energy. You're creating pressure. And when you do speak, you don't perform. You cut. A short line, a raised eyebrow, a subtle contradiction. Then silence again. And they feel it, because after 15 minutes of bragging, your quiet sentence lands like a gavel. That's why in business meetings, high stakes, negotiations, or even casual conversations, often owns the room most, the person who speaks least. You're not quiet because you're passive. You're quiet because you're calculating. Let them show all their cards. You keep yours close, because your stillness isn't emptiness. It's leverage. While others bleed powered by overperforming, you accumulate it in silence. And when people start asking, why hasn't he said anything yet? You've already won, because you've shifted the attention from what they're saying to what you might say. That's not passivity. That's psychological command. Most people walk into a room and adapt. They match the tone, mirror the mood, follow the rhythm that was already there. But the Machiavellian doesn't do that. He doesn't join the room. He alters it. His presence doesn't blend, it bends. In the charisma myth, Olivia Fox, Cabane writes, charisma is not energy you generate. It's energy you control and transfer. True charisma isn't about being entertaining. It's about being emotionally anchored. So anchored, in fact, that others begin gravitating toward your frequency. When you're calm, others calm down. When you're silent, they hesitate. When you slow your words, they lean in without realizing it. You've stopped following cues. You've become the cue. You can see this in the most unexpected places. A monk steps into a chaotic space, and the room softens. A respected professor walks into a noisy lecture hall. A general enters the war room, and nobody raises their voice. They didn't demand attention. They didn't announce their presence. They simply carried it. Simon Sinek said it well and started with why. People don't follow what you do. They follow why you are. And if your why is composed, powerful, and unshakable, your presence starts to do all the talking. You're not trying to win the room anymore. You're reprogramming it. And they don't know why they're shifting, why their energy drops, why their tone becomes more careful, but you do. Because you've trained yourself to be still when others perform, calm when others react, focused when others scatter. You're not pushing them. You're pulling the mood into orbit around you. And if someone tries to dominate the space, you don't fight them. You don't compete. You outlast them. You hold your ground and let their energy rise, peak, and burn out. Because in any room, business, social, political, even spiritual, the one who does the least but affects the most is the one who actually leads. That's not leadership by force. It's leadership by gravity. And once you've mastered that, you never need to raise your voice again. The most powerful people in the world often say the least. They walk in, and suddenly everything changes. Not because they commanded the room, but because the room anticipated their command. This is where you move from presence to influence. And the strangest part, you don't have to say a word. Robert Cialdini in Influence calls this the principle of authority. People are more likely to follow those who appear to have knowledge, control, and self-possession, even in silence. You don't need titles. You don't need approval. You don't even need to be the loudest. Because the moment people start adjusting to you, you've already become the standard. They watch your reactions before forming their own. They soften their tone when addressing you. They prepare to speak to you, even when you didn't ask them to. That's not luck. That's aura discipline. And it's built in the quiet choices. You respond late. Not from rudeness, but from you don't speak first. You let others reveal themselves. You don't validate often, which makes your approval feel like a reward. You're no longer accessible. You're exclusive. James Clear, in Atomic Habits, reminds us. Every action is a vote for the type of person you want to become. And when your actions say, I don't chase, I don't I don't need to be liked, people begin to believe it. They calibrate to it. Because influence isn't about convincing. It's about becoming the gravity they adjust to. Just look at royalty. The queen didn't explain her thoughts. She nodded. She smiled, or didn't. And in her silence, nations felt approval or pressure. They walk through factories or events, and everyone tightens up. Not because of threats, but because their energy has value. Now ask yourself, do you give away your presence for free? Do people know your every opinion? Do you chase reassurance, validation, or connection? If yes, you're trading influence for attention. Stop. Speak less. Weigh your words. Make your energy expensive. You don't need to dominate. You don't need to outperform. Because once your silence starts shaping other people's behavior, you've crossed a line from participant to force. That's not communication. That's command without a sound. If they can always reach you, they'll never respect you. If your presence is constant, your value becomes background noise. Power isn't about being everywhere. It's about being missed when you're not there. Robert Cialdini taught this clearly in Influence. When something becomes scarce, its perceived value skyrockets. So why do we undervalue our presence? Because we've been conditioned to think visibility is value. But Machiavelli knew better. Kings don't stroll the village square daily. They appear strategically. And when they do, their presence shifts the realm. That's not mystery for mystery's sake. It's resource management. Because your time, your energy, your availability are not just actions. They're currency. Greg McKeown in Essentialism writes, if you don't prioritize your life, someone else will. And I'll add, if you don't restrict your presence, the world will forget it's valuable. So here's the shift. Don't reply instantly. Don't accept every invitation. Don't show up unless your presence reshapes the energy. Why? Because overexposure erodes reverence. If you're always seen, you're eventually ignored. But when you disappear with purpose, when you create silence around yourself, people begin to project meaning into your absence. Why isn't he here? Is he watching? What does his silence mean? That's not distance. That's psychological presence. Think about cultural icons. Celebrities are seen constantly. They trend, then fade. Legends are remembered, even when they rarely appear. Why? Because they're not accessible. You must become the same. Don't trade your attention like loose change. Don't give your presence to those who haven't earned it. Don't stay too long. Don't speak too often. Don't be so reachable that your energy becomes routine. You're not here to entertain the crowd. You're here to govern the room. And rulers don't announce their value. They make others feel it when they're gone. So from now on, your presence is velvet rope access. Your time is invitation only. Your silence a message. And when they ask, where is he? Why did he leave? Why doesn't he reply anymore? Smile. Because it means they've felt your value. Not when you were near, but when you withdrew. Most people think leadership is what you do in the spotlight. But real leadership, the kind that commands respect without effort, comes down to one thing: emotional control. Because the one who controls himself automatically begins to control the room. When chaos erupts, everyone looks for someone who isn't panicking, someone who isn't reacting, someone who seems like he already knew this was going to happen. That person becomes the anchor. Daniel Goleman said in Emotional Intelligence, self-regulation, the ability to stay calm and clear-headed under pressure, is what separates leaders from followers. Let them raise their voices, interrupt each other, over-explain, overcommit, overreact. But you stay still, not frozen, just unshaken. Because when your calm exposes their chaos, you've already shifted the power dynamic. Now they're reacting to you, even when you haven't said a word. Robert Greene wrote in the 48 Laws of Power, Law 39, stir up waters to catch fish. Let others get emotional, and while they lose their shape, you remain formless, unreadable, lethal. This isn't passivity. This is strategy. You're not ignoring your emotions, you're mastering them. You feel everything, but you broadcast nothing. And when someone tries to provoke you, you don't defend. You don't raise your voice, you don't explain, you pause. You blink slowly, you tilt your head maybe and say, "Is that what you think?" And the weight of your stillness makes them doubt everything they just said. Because stillness is not silence. It's psychological pressure. You don't flinch. You don't laugh nervously. You don't fill empty air with noise. You simply remain exactly where you were, unbothered, undisturbed, unmoved. And because you are unmoved, they begin to move around you. That's what power looks like. It's not about proving yourself. It's about making others restructure their confidence in your presence. You control the emotional atmosphere because you've mastered the storm within yourself. And that kind of control, it radiates, it governs, it commands, without ever raising your voice. There's a level of presence so powerful, you no longer have to speak, no longer have to explain. You walk in, and everything realigns. That's not influence, that's gravity. You've moved past tactics now, past behavior, past posture, tone, and rhythm. You've become the atmosphere itself, and people adjust themselves, not to what you say, but to what they think you might believe. Simon Sinek writes in Start with Why. Great leaders inspire action not through orders, but by embodying the energy others want to align with. You don't lead by strategy, you lead by vibration. They speak more carefully when you're near. They check their tone. They look for micro-approval in your silence, your gaze, your posture. Even when you're not in the room, your presence lingers. They ask, what would he say about this? Would he approve? Should I send this to him first? They don't realize it, but they've internalized your weight. This is the highest level of power. Robert Greene, in The Laws of Human Nature, calls it the mythological presence, not based on what you do, but on what others imagine you're capable of. That's what aura truly becomes, not performance but projection. Your silence makes them guess. Your absence becomes strategy. Your unpredictability becomes fear. And your occasional attention a reward more addictive than praise. It's how kings ruled from thrones they barely left. It's how Miyamoto Musashi won battles before drawing his sword. It's why the Godfather only whispers. And yet, the entire room leans in. Because aura, at this stage, isn't noise. It's not even presence. It's a law. Like gravity, unseen, unspoken, but undeniably felt. You're no longer adjusting the room. You're warping it. Every step you take now has mass. Every word you drop has an orbit. And even your inconsistencies feel intentional. Because you've trained them to trust your mystery more than their own logic. This is where power reaches its purest form. You don't just walk in the room. You reshape its geometry. And when people begin shaping their behavior, their tone, their choices around your imagined expectations, you don't have to lead them anymore. They're already following. This is the end of the path. Not because you've finished, but because now you've disappeared into the throne. You are no longer trying to be powerful. You are now the embodiment of power itself. You don't command a room. You bend it. You don't raise your voice. You don't fight for position. You become the gravitational center they unknowingly orbit. That's the essence of the silent tyrant. No title, no noise, no performance, just presence. You don't impose rules. You are the rule. Robert Greene, Law 34. Be royal in your own fashion. Act like a king to be treated like one. And kings don't argue, they don't explain, they appear, then they vanish. And when they're gone, they're felt even more. Because your influence is no longer verbal. It's environmental. When you withdraw, people feel loss. When you arrive, they feel tension. When you remain still, they adjust their own energy just to stay in tune. You've become what Machiavelli described long ago. A ruler not by decree, but by design. And the moment they start asking, why doesn't he speak more? Why don't I know what he's thinking? Why do I feel like he's already decided? That's when you've won. Because you haven't just gained control. You've become the architecture of perception. You're not looking for applause. You're not chasing legacy. You're not building reputation. You're building gravity. Mark Manson wrote in The Subtle Art of Not Giving a FCK*. The less you care about being liked, the more you respect it. You no longer care who approves. Because you've built an aura that does the work for you. You don't need validation. You need silence when you walk into a room. You don't need people to praise you. You need them to pause before they speak. And you don't need power. Because now, you've become the source of it. If you're tired of being overlooked, if you're done chasing attention, if you're ready to become the man who bends rooms without raising his voice, then this is where it begins. Not with noise, not with performance, not with status, but with silence, with presence, with the quiet discipline that makes your name echo, even after you're gone. Like this video, subscribe for more ruthless truths, and then disappear until your presence is felt again. Because kings are not remembered by how often they were seen, but by how the world changed in their shadow.